Hello friends, welcome to the sleep story. Tonight's story is very relaxing and magical. Listen quietly, close your eyes, and let yourself drift into sleep. Now, the story begins. Title: The Doctor of Sleep, Part 1. In a quiet town far away, there lived a mysterious doctor. Nobody knew his real name. Everyone called him the Doctor of Sleep. During the day, his house looked ordinary, but every night, a soft blue light appeared in the windows. People said, "If sleep cannot find you, the Doctor of Sleep will." One night, a 12-year-old boy named Neil could not sleep. He stayed awake for hours. The room was dark. The clock kept ticking. Then, suddenly, a small piece of paper flew through his window. Neil picked it up. Written on it, "If sleep cannot find you, come find me." Below the message was an address. Neil looked outside, far away. In the darkness, he saw a blue house. He quietly opened the door and walked toward it. Neil stood in front of the dark doorway. Above it, room of lost dreams. Cold air slowly moved past him. The Doctor of Sleep stood behind him quietly. Neil looked back. "Do I have to go?" The doctor nodded. "Everyone who comes here chooses eventually." Neil looked into the darkness. "What happens inside?" The doctor answered. "You meet the nights you never finished." Neil did not understand, but somehow those words felt familiar. He took one step forward. The door slowly closed behind him. Everything became silent. No blue lights, no clocks, only darkness. Neil waited. Then a small floating light appeared. Then another, then another. Soon, hundreds of tiny lights floated around him. Blue, white, silver. They moved slowly like fireflies. Neil reached toward one. The moment his finger touched it, everything changed. Suddenly, he was standing inside his bedroom. Rain outside, dark sky. His younger self sat on the bed, eyes open, looking at the ceiling. Neil slowly walked closer. The younger version whispered, "What if tomorrow goes wrong?" Neil remembered. That night, before a school performance, the night he stayed awake, the night he thought too much. The memory disappeared. Neil returned to the dark room. Another light floated closer. He touched it. Now, he stood inside a classroom. Children laughing. Someone pointed. Someone whispered. Young Neil stayed silent, looking down. The memory faded. Again, back in darkness. Neil looked around. Every light was a memory, not dreams. Sleepless nights, thoughts, feelings, things he never let go. He slowly walked deeper. More lights appeared. One showed him staring at a clock. One showed him pretending to sleep. One showed him staying awake because of fear. Another because of sadness. Another for no reason at all. Neil whispered, "These are all mine." Then, footsteps. Slow. Behind him. Step. 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 Neil turned. Nobody. Again. Step. 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 A shadow appeared between the floating lines. Tall. Still. Watching him. Neil backed away. The shadow moved closer. Its face slowly became visible. Neil froze. It looked exactly like him. Same eyes. Same face. But tired. Very tired. Dark circles. Empty expression. The shadow smiled. "You finally came back," Neil whispered. "Who are you?" The shadow answered, "I am the version of you that never rested." Neil shook his head. "No." The shadow nodded. "You left me here." The lights around them began moving faster. The room slowly disappeared. Now, they stood under a night sky. thousands of stars above. The shadow pointed upward. Each star became a memory. Every sleepless night, every worry, every unfinished thought. The shadow looked at Neil. You thought sleep disappeared. Neil stayed silent. The shadow continued. Sleep waits, but your thoughts keep blocking the door. Neil looked down. The shadow stepped closer. Do you remember the last night you slept peacefully? Neil tried, but he could not. The shadow smiled sadly. You forgot. Silence. Wind moved across the empty world. The shadow held out a hand. Neil stared. What happens if I take your hand? The shadow answered, you stop running. Neil looked at the stars. Then, slowly, he reached forward. The moment their hands touched, all the stars exploded into blue light. Neil closed his eyes. Everything disappeared. When he opened them, he was back inside the blue room. The doctor of sleep sat quietly. The glowing bottle stood on the table, but now it was empty. Neil blinked. My worries. The doctor smiled. You finally looked at them. Neil stayed quiet. The doctor stood, walked toward a wall. Hundreds of shelves, thousands of bottles. Some bright, some dark, some sleeping. The doctor pointed. One empty space. That one was yours. Neil looked. No bottle. Nothing. He turned. Will I sleep now? The doctor of sleep smiled softly. Sleep is not something you catch. He looked out the window. It is something you allow. Then, another door appeared. Smaller. White. No lights. Only words. Open only when ready. Neil looked at the doctor. What is inside? The doctor answered, the dream that stayed for you. Neil slowly reached for the handle. His fingers touched it. And suddenly, he realized the doctor of sleep was gone. Only silence remained. In front of the white door, the room behind him was silent. No clocks, no glowing bottles, no doctor, only the white door, written across it, open only when ready. Neil looked around one last time. Nothing moved. No answer came. Slowly, he placed his hand on the handle. The door opened. Warm air moved across his face. Not cold, not dark. Warm, like sunlight after rain. Neil stepped inside. The door closed. At first, there was nothing. Only white. No walls. No sky. No ground. Just endless white space. Neil looked down. Now there was a floor. Soft, like clouds. He started walking. Each step created small circles of light. He kept moving. No idea where he was going. Minutes passed. Then, he heard water. Very far away. Neil followed the sound. The white world slowly changed. Clouds appeared, then grass, then trees, then a river, birds, wind, a bright sky. Neil stopped. The place felt familiar, too familiar. Across the river, there was a small house. His house, but different, cleaner, brighter, peaceful. Neil walked closer. The front door was open. Inside, everything looked perfect. His room, his desk, his bed, sunlight through the window. And someone was there. A boy, sitting quietly. Neil froze. The boy looked exactly like him. Same eyes, same face, but younger, relaxed, smiling. The boy looked up. You came. Neil slowly stepped forward. Who are you? The boy smiled. You forgot me. Neil stared. The boy stood, walked to the window, then said, I'm your sleeping self. Neil said nothing. The boy looked outside. The version of you that stayed here. Neil frowned. What does that mean? The boy turned. When you stopped resting, you stopped visiting. Neil looked around. The room suddenly felt sad. The boy walked outside. Neil followed. They stood beside the river. The younger version pointed. Across the distance, tree houses, floating bridges, cloud islands, windmills, colorful places. The younger Neil smiled. You made all of this, Neil whispered. I don't remember. The younger version nodded. That's what happens. Wind moved slowly. The younger version sat beside the river. Neil sat too. Then the boy quietly asked, when was the last time you slept without thinking? Neil tried. Nothing. He couldn't remember. The boy smiled sadly. You see? Silence. Then, Neil noticed something strange. Far away, part of the sky was dark. Not normal dark, heavy dark, like smoke, like night, slowly moving. Neil pointed. What is that? The younger version looked. His smile disappeared. That is where forgotten dreams go. Neil stared. The darkness slowly spread, touching trees, touching grass. Every place it touched lost color. Neil stood. What happens if it reaches here? The younger version answered, this place disappears. Neil looked at him. How do we stop it? The younger version smiled. Remember, Neil frowned. That's all? The boy nodded. This world lives from remembered dreams. The darkness moved closer. Wind became colder. Birds disappeared. The river slowed. The younger version stood. Quick! Neil looked confused. The boy said, tell me one dream you remember. Neil closed his eyes. Nothing. Then, a memory. Small. He smiled. When I was younger, I dreamed I could fly. Instantly, one tree became bright green. The younger version smiled. Again, Neil thought. I dreamed I had a house in the clouds. A bridge appeared. Again, I dreamed I could breathe underwater. Flowers appeared. Again, I dreamed I walked among stars. The sky became brighter. The darkness slowed. Again, again, again. Dream after dream. Memory after memory. The world became alive. Colors returned. The river moved. Wind became warm. The younger version laughed. Neil laughed too. Then suddenly, the darkness stopped. Completely. The sky became clear. The younger version looked at Neil. You remembered! Neil looked around. Everything looked alive. Then, he noticed something. The younger version was fading. Small lights appeared around him. Neil frowned. What's happening? The boy smiled. You found your way back. Neil stepped forward. Wait. The younger version looked at him. You don't need me to stay here anymore. Neil shook his head. The younger version laughed softly. You'll see me again. Neil whispered. When? The boy pointed upward. Whenever you sleep without chasing sleep. The wind moved. The boy slowly disappeared. Before fading, he smiled and said, leave room for dreams. White light filled the world. Neil closed his eyes. When he opened them, he was back. Inside the blue house, the doctor of sleep stood by the door. Neil looked at him. The doctor asked, what did you find? Neil thought, then answered, a place that waited for me. Neil opened his eyes. Morning light filled his room. For a moment, he stayed still. The ceiling, the window, the sound of birds. Everything looked normal. Too normal. Neil sat up. He looked around slowly. His desk was there. His books, his chair, his clock. Nothing strange. Nothing magical. But something felt different. His chest felt lighter. His thoughts felt quieter. Neil looked at the clock. 8:14 a.m. He blinked, then looked again. Usually, he woke up tired. Today, he didn't. Not energetic, not excited, just calm. Like his mind finally stopped talking. Neil stood and walked to the window. Outside, people moved normally. Cars, morning air, nothing unusual. Neil smiled slightly. Maybe it was a dream. Maybe. Then, he felt something in his pocket. Neil stopped. Slowly, he reached inside. A folded piece of paper. His expression changed. He opened it. Only 4 words. See you next night. Neil stared, then folded it again, and quietly put it away. That day felt strange. At school, everything seemed slower. People laughed, teachers spoke, friends talked. But Neil noticed something. Usually, his mind never stayed in one place. Now, it did. For the first time in weeks, he listened. Really listened. Hours passed. Then lunch. Neil sat alone, looking outside. One of his classmates sat nearby. Are you okay? Neil looked up. He smiled. Yeah. The classmate looked surprised. Neil realized he had not smiled like that in a long time. School ended. He walked home. The afternoon passed quietly. Dinner, reading, a little drawing. No pressure, no forcing himself to sleep. When night came, Neil turned off the light, lay down, closed his eyes, and waited. 5 minutes. 10. His thoughts stayed quiet. He smiled. Maybe tonight. Then, knock. Neil opened his eyes. Silence. He sat up. Knock. From the window. Neil looked. Nothing outside. Another knock. Slow. Neil stood. Walked over. Opened the window. Cold night air entered. Outside, floating in the darkness. Another paper. Neil caught it. Opened it. Written in blue ink. Your work is not finished. Neil looked outside. Far away. A small blue light. The house. Neil stared. He thought, I already went. Why again? Then another line appeared. Someone else is waiting. Neil looked at the paper. The writing slowly disappeared. Neil looked back at his room. Then outside. After a moment, he put on his shoes and left. The road felt different tonight. The town looked asleep. Streetlights glowed softly. The blue house waited, exactly where it was before. Neil reached the door. Before he knocked, it opened. The doctor of sleep stood inside. Same white coat, same quiet eyes. He smiled. You returned. Neil stepped inside. I thought it was over. The doctor closed the door. It usually begins that way. Neil looked around. The shelves were back. The glowing bottles. The clocks. Everything. Neil asked, why am I here? The doctor looked toward another room, then answered, someone needs help. Neil frowned. You help people. The doctor looked at him. Tonight, you do. Neil stared. The doctor walked deeper into the house. Neil followed. They reached a room he had never seen. Inside, rows of sleeping chairs. Empty, except one. Someone sat there, head lowered. A girl, about Neil's age. She looked asleep, but restless. Neil whispered, who is she? The doctor answered, she stopped dreaming. Neil looked confused. The doctor continued, she sleeps, but never rests. Neil looked at the girl. She looked tired, like she carried something invisible. The doctor handed Neil a small blue lantern. Neil took it. What do I do? The doctor smiled. Find what she lost. Before Neil answered, the room disappeared. Suddenly, Neil stood somewhere else. Snow, cold air, gray sky. He looked around. The girl stood nearby, looking lost. She looked at Neil. Are you real? Neil blinked. I think so. The girl looked away. This place changes. Neil looked around. Empty roads, snow, no houses, no people. He asked, where are we? The girl answered, I don't know. Neil noticed something strange. Everything ahead disappeared into fog, like unfinished memories. The girls started walking. Neil followed. After a while, they reached a frozen lake. The girl stopped. She stared at the ice. Neil asked, "What happened?" She stayed quiet, then finally said, "I forgot." Neil looked at her. "What?" She looked down. "What I wanted." Wind crossed the lake. She continued, "I used to dream all the time." She looked at the sky. Then one day, I stopped. Neil remembered the words, forgotten dreams. He sat beside her and asked, "What did you dream about?" The girl smiled weakly. "I don't remember." Silence. Neil looked across the frozen lake. Then, remember,